A new report claims that, according to a former Facebook employee, the social media mega company sometimes ignores what is actually trending among its billion users if the story originated from a conservative news source or if it's a topic causing buzz among conservatives.
Internal documents from Facebook obtained by Breitbart News reveal the criteria that company uses to label certain groups and individuals as so-called hate agents.
Who's a hate agent? Overwhelmingly people on the right. Trump supporters in particular, of course, and also some people from other groups as well. They're giving you a literal score, a hate agent score. And how do you get a point? You commit hate. And how do you commit hate? Well, Facebook is up to them. And they're doing it entirely anonymously. They're not providing the details. And when you get a certain threshold, then you get deplatformed.
Just like they already banned Alex Jones and many others.
This is what they're doing as, I believe, a pilot program, which will be used to apply to whoever they want to get them off of their platform to sanitize it. They're not even told what violations they had. And in fact, Tucker, as you noted, they don't apply only to things that are reported on Facebook or posted to Facebook. These are things that happen if you're in public life. They're things that happen in your personal life. They could even be conversations you had in private. If Facebook becomes aware of them, your tattoos. You could have a hate item. You could literally have a piece of merchandise that could be determined hateful. A MAGA hat, maybe, perhaps, we don't know, because Facebook won't explain even to the people who are being deplatformed.
How does Facebook define hate?
They don't define hate, and they acknowledge that is per our definition. They literally admit in the document that they're the ones who are defining it. Remember, they're collecting 2 years worth of data to give you your hate agent score. So they could redefine it at any moment, Tucker. So things you and I could have done 2 years ago might not categorize as hate today, but they can just move the definition whenever they feel. One thing that's very interesting, you note the political bias here, is that they're tracking literal violence, but only against protected groups of people. They're not protecting it. They're not tracking violence if it is not against a non-protected person. For example, illegal aliens, Facebook is tracking violence against them, but they're not tracking them against non-protected people. So I'm guessing, Tucker, when you were attacked in your home and your family was attacked, that might not be an example of hate according to Facebook, but if a non-American is attacked, then it is hate.
Last week, the Democratic Party chairman, Tom Perez, met with a Council on Technology and Society. This council included the CEO of the tech company TaskRabbit, among others. According to a summary of the meeting that we received, the group bluntly asked Tom Perez, again, the head of the Democratic Party, what they could do to, quote, contribute to the broad social good. When you ask that question to the head of the Democratic Party, what are you asking? How can we elect Democrats? Which is what they're trying to do.
Most of these people, most of these left-leaning people and the heads of the tech company and that populate tech companies are just so certain in their correctness. And so they think that they are fighting the good fight and helping Facebook in their mission. And Facebook is really largely like an activist company more than anything else.
Mark Zuckerberg himself admitted it's a single-party town, and these people are so powerful. And part of the danger, Tucker, is they will not come clean. And no one has had a peek under the hood. This is the closest we've gotten. The Daily Caller had a great scoop earlier this week on Google, literally having blacklists that are referred to as blacklists. These are real. This is happening. And after they're done with us in public life, they'll come to you in private life for sure.
Meanwhile, in a not unrelated story, a coalition of major companies, including Verizon, NBC, Facebook, and Google, the biggest companies, has announced a new Global Alliance for Responsible Media. Remember that, Global Alliance for Responsible Media. Now, the stated goal is to pressure tech platforms to, quote, develop and deliver against a concrete set of actions, protocols, and processes for protecting people and brands, blah, blah, blah. In other words, what they're really saying is censorship, and censorship on a vast scale. If they have their way, this will be the end of free speech online and the death, by the way, of mainstream conservatism. Steven Crowder is a conservative comedian who makes videos on YouTube. He's pretty popular. He's got close to 4 million subscribers and tens of millions of viewers. His stuff isn't for everyone, but so. If you don't like his videos, watch Colbert. It's a free country, or it used to be. The press is working to change that. A few days ago, a writer at Vox.com demanded that YouTube ban Steven Crowder. Why? For the crime of insulting him. Amazingly, many in the Washington press corps agreed. You shouldn't be allowed to mock talentless Vox writers, they said. Apparently, it's a new addition to the First Amendment. Turns out the Vox writer in question is hardly a sympathetic figure. Hardly. He's got a long history of leveling racist attacks online. He's called for physically assaulting people he disagrees with politically, even as he whines about being oppressed himself. He is, in other words, a classic archetype on the left. He's a fascist posing as a victim. No sensible adult would take him seriously. And yet YouTube is obeying his commands. The company announced it will demonetize Steven Crowder's YouTube channel, killing his business. They did this even though in a statement they admitted that Crowder had broken no rules. Vox, amazingly, meanwhile, released a series of statements demanding that YouTube censor Crowder entirely, not just demonetize him, but bounce him off. So much for freedom of the press. The real question, though, for the rest of us is, why is this allowed to continue? You don't have immunity. You don't have the immunity that YouTube, for example, enjoys, was granted by Congress. You founded a pretty big and well-known site. If you libel someone, you can be sued. They're immune from that. Why do they retain that immunity?
That's a really good question. And the reason is because originally these companies like YouTube, Google, Twitter, Facebook were supposed to be like AT&T, which are just neutral public platforms, right? So if Steven Crowder wants to call someone using AT&T and organize an anti-Vox rally, nobody expects AT&T to stop him because the idea is it's just a platform for people to use. That's what Silicon Valley companies originally were supposed to be, and they got immunity for it. In reality, this power to censor was not one that they wanted. It was one that was foisted upon them, amazingly largely by journalists who were demanding that they remove voices from the internet. Imagine going into journalism and then begging corporations to silence and censor people. That's the real reason they ended up in this position. I personally find Steven Crowder to be just a contemptuous cretin as a commentator. I do think he's an infantile bully and bigot, which are not words I easily invoke. He didn't just criticize Carlos Maza. He mocked him for being gay and for being Latino, used a lisp and things to ridicule him, sent a lot of harassment his way. But that's the point, Tucker, is that censorship advocates want our brains to only go to that most primitive first level of, do we hate this person? And are we therefore glad that they're being censored, without thinking about the framework being endorsed or the consequences that ensue from it? I mean, I personally, it resonates a lot for me because I've dealt with harassment far greater than what Carlos Maza is complaining of. I'm a gay man in a country, Brazil, that just elected a president driven by intense anti-gay animus. My husband's a member of Congress in the oppositional party. We've been mocked and derided with our sexual orientation, not by random YouTubers, but by the president of the country himself on Twitter, and his family members who are elected members of Congress. And it would never occur to me to run to social media companies to beg for censorship.
Platforms like Twitter and Facebook and YouTube, these are the modern public square, obviously. Congress has acknowledged them as such. Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act gives tech companies special immunity from being sued for defamation or fraud, immunity that we don't have on this channel, for example. And the purpose of this is to allow, quote, true diversity of political discourse. It's a high-minded cause. The effect is immunity, and that immunity is worth tens of billions of dollars. It's one of the reasons the owners of Twitter and Facebook and Google are so rich. You guaranteed that to them through your representatives in the Congress. And yet, in return, these tech companies violate the terms of the deal every minute of every day. They're not open forums. They're ongoing exercises in control and censorship.
I don't want to live in a world where our discourse is policed and determined by benevolent overlords who run Silicon Valley companies, who are always going to cater to the most powerful faction. That's what happened here. YouTube caved in, not in defense of the marginalized person, but in defense of the powerful one, the one who, despite being gay and Latino, works for a major media conglomerate. And that's what they're always going to do, is defend the mob and defend the powerful at the expense of those who are marginalized.